I stood outside my sister's wedding, while everyone else was inside celebrating. The doors were right in front of me, music playing, people laughing, and my father standing between me and the entrance. He didn't lower his voice. He didn't try to hide it. He looked at me and said, "You're not coming in," just like that. No explanation, no hesitation. The door closed and I was left standing there, holding an invitation with my own name on it. But that wasn't the worst part. 3 days later, my phone rang, and my mother asked me how I planned to pay $40,000. For a wedding I wasn't allowed to attend, with a contract I never signed. That's when everything changed. Because I don't panic when something feels wrong. I looked closer, and what I found wasn't just betrayal, it was fraud. And the next time my family saw me, it wouldn't be outside a door, it would be in a room where no one could walk away. Because this time, the truth wouldn't come from me, it would be read out loud by the police. I should have known something was wrong the moment the invitation arrived, not because of what it said, but because of who sent it. My family didn't invite me to things anymore. Not birthdays, not holidays, not even the small, meaningless gatherings people pretend matter. For years, I had existed somewhere just outside their lives, close enough to be called when needed, far enough to be forgotten when I wasn't. So when I saw my name printed on that envelope, thick cream paper, gold lettering, my full name spelled correctly for once, I didn't feel excitement, I felt confusion. I turned it over in my hands for a few seconds before opening it, like the weight of it might tell me something the words wouldn't. Inside was a formal wedding invitation. My sister's name, her fiancé's name, a venue I'd never heard of but instantly knew was expensive, black tie, evening ceremony, everything about it screamed money. That alone didn't make sense, because growing up, money had always been tight, not the kind of tight you joke about. The kind that shows up in arguments, in silence at dinner tables, in things you learn not to ask for. And yet here it was, a wedding that looked like it belonged to a completely different family. I kept reading. The details were precise, carefully chosen words, everything polished, too polished. Then something slipped out from behind the main card, a smaller note, handwritten. I recognized the handwriting immediately. My sister. Short, curved letters, careless in a way that always made things feel easy for her. I unfolded it slowly. "It wouldn't feel right without you there, please come." No apology, no explanation. Just that. 7 years of distance reduced to 2 lines. I sat there for a long time after reading it. Because part of me knew better. Part of me remembered exactly how things worked in that house. There were always 2 versions of everything. There was her version, the one where doors opened, opportunities appeared, and mistakes were quietly forgiven. And then there was mine. The version where I learned early that if I wanted something, I had to build it myself. No reminders, no support, no safety net. I didn't resent it anymore. Not really. I'd made something out of that distance. A career, a life, a space that belonged entirely to me. But distance doesn't erase memory, and memory doesn't let you pretend things were ever equal. So I sat there holding that note, asking myself a question I didn't want to answer. Why now? Why, after years of silence, did I suddenly matter again? I could have ignored it. That would have been the smart decision, the predictable one. The version of me I'd built over the years, the one that didn't go where she wasn't wanted, would have thrown it away and moved on, but something else got in the way. Not forgiveness, not hope, something quieter, curiosity. Because there's a difference between letting go and needing to understand. And I realized, sitting there with that invitation in my hands, I didn't need closure, I needed clarity. I needed to see with my own eyes whether anything had actually changed. Or if this was just another version of the same story, wrapped in better paper. I booked the flight that night. London to Charlotte, 18 hours, including the connection. The confirmation email came through a few minutes later, and I stared at it longer than I should have. Because once that ticket was booked, this stopped being a thought, and became a decision. I told myself it didn't matter what happened when I got there. I told myself I wasn't going for them. I was going for me. To see it. To understand it. To finally put something to rest that had been sitting unresolved for too long. That's what I told myself. And maybe part of me believed it. But there was another part, the one I didn't say out loud, that wondered something far more dangerous. What if this time, they actually meant it? What if this invitation wasn't about obligation, but about finally letting me back in? I should have known better. People don't change that easily. Not without a reason, and definitely not without a cost. I just didn't know yet what that cost was going to be, or that by the time I found out, I'd already be standing outside a locked door, with my name written somewhere it never should have been. I thought I was flying in for a wedding. I didn't realize I was walking into something they had already signed me into. The airport always feels like a place where people are either leaving something behind or running towards something they're not ready for. I wasn't sure which one I was. Heathrow was crowded that morning, rolling suitcases, overlapping announcements, the low hum of people moving with purpose. I stood near the departure board longer than I needed to, staring at my flight to Charlotte, as if it might tell me something I hadn't figured out yet. On time. Everything about it felt normal, too normal. I checked in, moved through security, and found a seat near the window. Planes taxied in the distance under a pale gray sky, their movements smooth, predictable, nothing like what I felt inside. My phone buzzed. A message from Rachel. "You're actually going." I smiled faintly and typed back. "Already at the airport." 3 dots appeared almost instantly. That's bold. Or dangerous, I can't decide. I stared at her words for a second longer than I should have. Rachel didn't exaggerate. She didn't do drama. If she said something felt off, it usually was. "It's just a wedding," I replied. There was a pause this time, longer. Then, "It's your family. That's never just anything." I didn't respond. Because she wasn't wrong, I just wasn't ready to admit it. The flight was long enough to make you think about things you usually avoid. There's something about being 30,000 feet above everything that strips away distractions. No noise except the engine. No obligations except sitting still, just time and thoughts. I tried to focus on work at first, emails, documents, anything that kept my mind occupied. But every time I read a sentence, I found myself rereading it again. My attention wasn't there. It kept drifting back to that invitation. To those 2 lines. "It wouldn't feel right without you there." I replayed them over and over, trying to hear the intention behind them. Was it genuine? Or was it just convenient? Because my family had always been good at one thing: knowing exactly when to reach out, and exactly when to disappear. I leaned back in my seat, closing my eyes for a moment. Memories have a way of showing up when you don't invite them. A birthday I wasn't told about. A graduation where my seat stayed empty. A phone call that only came when something needed fixing. It wasn't one big moment, it was a pattern. And patterns don't change overnight. Still, I was on that plane, which meant some part of me was willing to test that pattern one more time. We landed in Charlotte just before sunset. The air hit differently the moment I stepped outside, warmer, heavier. Familiar in a way that felt both distant and too close at the same time. I picked up my rental car and drove toward the hotel. Same roads, same signs. Same turns I could probably take with my eyes closed. Nothing had changed. And yet everything had. Because I wasn't the same person who left, and I had no idea what kind of people I was coming back to. The hotel room was exactly what you'd expect. Neutral colors. Soft lighting. A bed that looked more inviting than it felt. I set my suitcase down and stood there for a moment, letting the silence settle. No welcome message. No, "We're glad you're here." No one asking if I landed safely. Just quiet. I pulled out my phone and stared at my contacts list. It rang longer than expected. Once. Twice. 3 times. Just as I was about to hang up. "Hey." Her voice was bright. Too bright. "You made it?" "Yeah. Just got to the hotel." "Good, good. Tomorrow's going to be busy." There was noise behind her, voices, movement. Something that sounded like laughter. She wasn't alone. "Anything I should know?" I asked. A slight pause. "Just be there by 2. That was it. "No, I'm glad you came." "No, I can't wait to see you. Just instructions." "Okay," I said. Another pause. "I've gotta go," she added quickly. "We're in the middle of rehearsal stuff." "Of course. See you tomorrow." The line went dead. I lowered the phone slowly. That conversation told me everything, without saying anything at all. I waited a few minutes before calling my mother. "Oh, you actually came. Not, hello. Not, how are you? Just that." I said I would. "Well, the flight is long," she replied. "I thought you might change your mind." I sat on the edge of the bed staring at the blank wall in front of me. No excitement, no warmth. "I'll be at the venue tomorrow," I said. "All right." Another pause. "Drive safe." And then she hung up. I stayed sitting there for a long time after that, because something didn't add up. It wasn't one thing. It was everything. The invitation that felt too formal, the note that felt too brief, the calls that felt empty. No one had asked me to come. Not really. They had invited me, but they hadn't welcomed me. And there's a difference, a big one. Later that night, I stood by the window, looking out at the dimly lit parking lot below. Cars came and went. People moved in and out. Normal life. Normal patterns. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was standing just outside something I didn't fully understand yet, like I had stepped into a story already in motion, without knowing my role in it. I picked up the invitation from my bag again, running my fingers over the gold lettering. It looked perfect. Everything about it was designed to impress, to convince, to create an image of something flawless. But the closer I looked, the more it felt like exactly that, an image, not reality, a reflection. A mirage. I set it back down and turned off the lights. The room fell into darkness, but my mind didn't. Because somewhere between London and Charlotte, something had shifted, not enough to stop me, but enough to warn me. And I've learned to trust that feeling. Because every time I've ignored it, I've paid for it later. By the time I closed my eyes that night, I already knew one thing. This wasn't going to be the reunion they promised. And whatever was waiting for me at that wedding wasn't going to be welcoming. It was going to be a door that someone had already decided I wouldn't be allowed to walk through. I got there early, not because I was eager, but because I didn't want to walk in late. There's a difference. The Whitmore estate sat at the end of a long gravel drive, lined with soft white lights that were just starting to glow as the afternoon faded into evening. From a distance, it looked exactly like the kind of place you'd expect from that invitation: expensive, polished, perfect. The kind of place where everything is designed to look effortless. I parked a little further back than most of the other cars. Not intentionally. Just instinct. I sat there for a moment, hands resting on the steering wheel, watching guests step out of their vehicles. Men in dark suits. Women in dresses that caught the light as they moved. Everyone looked like they belonged. That thought stayed with me longer than it should have. Then I picked up my bag, stepped out of the car and walked toward the entrance. Gravel shifted under my heels with each step. The sound was small, but sharp enough to cut through everything else, the music drifting faintly from inside, the low hum of conversation, the occasional burst of laughter. I could see through the tall glass doors. A chandelier hung in the center of the room, casting warm light over everything beneath it. People were already gathering, greeting each other, moving easily in a space that felt closed. Not physically, but socially. Like everyone inside already understood something I didn't. I adjusted my grip on the invitation in my hand. My name was printed there. Clear? Formal? Undeniable. I took a few more steps forward, and that's when I saw him. My father was standing just outside the entrance. Not inside welcoming guests. Not near the ceremony space. Just there. As if he was waiting. For me, he noticed me at the same moment I recognized him. His posture shifted slightly. Just enough to tell me this wasn't a coincidence. I kept walking. Because stopping would have made it real too soon. Because some part of me still believed this was just awkward timing. That he'd say something normal. Something expected. "Athena, you made it." Something like that. But when I got close enough to see his face clearly, I knew. There was no warmth there, no surprise. Just decision. "Athena," he said. My name sounded different coming from him, flat. Controlled. "I'm here for the wedding," I replied, holding up the invitation slightly. Not defensively, just factually. His eyes flicked down to it for less than a second. Then back to me. "You need to leave." I thought I misheard him. I actually paused, waiting for something else to follow. For context. For explanation. For anything that would make that sentence make sense. "I'm sorry," I said. Only family is allowed inside," he continued, his tone steady, as if he'd already rehearsed this. "You shouldn't be here." The words didn't hit all at once. They landed in pieces. Slowly, deliberately, I looked past him through the glass doors. Inside, I could see my sister. White dress, smiling, surrounded by people. Everything looked exactly the way it was supposed to. Like nothing was wrong, like I didn't exist. "I have an invitation," I said quietly, holding it up again. My voice didn't shake. That surprised me. He didn't even look at it this time. "A mistake. 2 words. Simple. Clean. Final. You shouldn't have come." Something inside me shifted then, not loudly. Not dramatically. Just quietly, like a door closing somewhere deep enough that no one else could hear it. I glanced to the side. A couple walking toward the entrance slowed slightly, their eyes flicking between us before quickly looking away. They heard. Of course they did. This wasn't private. It was happening right there, in front of anyone who happened to be close enough. "Dad," I said, keeping my voice even. "I'm not doing anything," he replied. "I'm telling you the situation." The situation. I almost smiled at that. Because it sounded like something you'd say about a scheduling conflict. "Not this. Guests are arriving," he added. "Let's not make a scene." Let's not make a scene. That was the moment it became clear. He wasn't trying to avoid embarrassment. He was trying to control it. To contain it. To make sure it didn't spread beyond this exact moment. I looked past him again, and this time I saw my mother. She was standing just inside the doorway. Watching. Not coming out. Not intervening. Not even pretending she didn't see what was happening. Just watching. That hurt more than anything he said. Because silence in that moment wasn't neutral. It was agreement. I felt the weight of the invitation in my hand. For a second, I considered saying something else. Arguing, pushing past him. Forcing the situation into something bigger. But I didn't. Not because I couldn't. Because I wouldn't. There's a difference between being denied entry and begging for it. And I wasn't going to cross that line. Not for them. I lowered the invitation slowly. "All right," I said. Just that. No anger, no raised voice. Nothing they could use to rewrite this later. He didn't respond. He just stepped slightly to the side, clearing space. Not for me to enter, but for me to leave. That was his final answer. I turned around, the gravel sounded louder this time. Every step felt sharper. More deliberate. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. Because I already knew what I'd see. The door closing. And everything continuing inside. Like I had never been there at all. The moment I got into the car, the silence hit differently. Closed space, no eyes, no control. That's when it finally landed. Not the words. Not the realization. They knew I was coming. They sent the invitation. They had my flight details. And they still chose this. That wasn't an accident. That was a decision. A planned one. And suddenly, everything else didn't feel random anymore. The cold phone call, the short responses, the lack of welcome, it all lined up. Too cleanly. Too intentionally. I gripped the steering wheel, staring straight ahead, because there was only one question left. Why? Why invite me? Just to lock me out. And more importantly, what were they trying to keep me away from? I thought the worst part was being left outside that door. I was wrong. Because 3 days later, they would call me and ask me to pay for something I was never supposed to see. The next 3 days passed in a kind of quiet that didn't feel normal, not peaceful, not restful, just empty. I stayed in my hotel room longer than I planned to, worked when I could, scrolled when I couldn't. Anything to avoid thinking about that moment at the door. But avoidance has limits. Because even when you don't replay something consciously, your mind still circles it, every detail, every word, every look that didn't need to be explained. By Monday morning, the city outside my window felt like it was moving on without me. Cars passed, people went to work, life continued. And somehow I was still standing on that gravel path. Still holding that invitation. Still hearing those words, "You shouldn't have come." I made the mistake of opening social media. I don't know why. Maybe I wanted proof that it actually happened. Or maybe some part of me was still hoping I'd see something different. An explanation. An acknowledgement. anything. Instead, I saw perfection. Photos from the wedding filled my screen. Golden light, carefully framed moments. My sister smiling like nothing in the world had ever gone wrong. The venue looked even more expensive in pictures. The kind of place that didn't just host events, it performed them. Everything was curated, everything intentional, and not once, not a single frame, included me. It was like I had never been there. Like the door hadn't closed in my face. Like I hadn't existed in that moment at all. I scrolled a little further. My mother had posted a college. Old photos mixed with new ones. My sister as a child, my sister at prom, my sister at the altar. And tucked into the corner, a photo of both of us. From years ago. Before everything changed. The caption ready. So proud of both my girls. Both. I stared at that word longer than I should have. Because it wasn't just inaccurate. It was strategic. A way to present something that wasn't true. In a way that no one would question. To anyone looking from the outside, we were a complete family. United, celebrating together. No gaps, no fractures, no locked doors, just a story. And stories, when told well enough, don't need to be real. They just need to be believed. I closed the app, set my phone down, and sat there in silence. Because at that point, I understood something clearly. Whatever happened at that wedding wasn't meant to be seen. Not by me. Not by anyone who might ask the wrong questions, and that meant there was something worth hiding. The call came Tuesday morning, 9:17 a.m. I remember the time because I looked at it twice before answering. My mother's name on the screen. I almost didn't pick up. But I've learned something over the years. When something doesn't make sensey, you don't avoid it. You face it. You listen. And you let people tell you more than they intend to, so I answered. Athena. No greeting. No hesitation. Just my name. We need to discuss the bill. I sat up slightly. What bill? A pause. Not long. Just enough to feel deliberate. The venue, she said. The total is $40,000. The number landed but didn't settle, because it didn't make sense. Not in context. Not in reality. Okay, I said slowly. And another pause. Then, how are you planning to pay it? That was the moment everything shifted. Not emotionally, mentally. Because confusion disappeared. And something else took its place. Focus. I'm not following, I said. Why would I be paying for your venue? There was movement on the other end. A sound. Then a second voice. My father. He didn't ask how I was. Didn't acknowledge anything that had happened. He went straight to it. Your name is on the contract, he said. You're the guarantor. The words were precise. Too precise, like he'd practiced them. I leaned back in the chair, my grip on the phone tightening just slightly. I didn't sign anything, I replied. You did, he said flatly. We have the agreement. No, I said, just as calm. You have something with my name on it. That's not the same thing. Silence. A few seconds. Then, don't make this difficult, Athena, he added. The venue expects payment. This needs to be handled. Like it was routine. Like it was mine. I looked at the wall in front of me, letting the words settle into something clear. You're asking me to pay $40,000, I said slowly, for a wedding I wasn't allowed to attend based on a contract I've never seen. That's not what I'm saying, he replied. That's exactly what you're saying. Another pause. Longer this time. Because there are moments when people realize the story they prepared isn't working and they don't know how to adjust it. You owe this family, he said finally. There it was, not logic, not explanation. The same pattern. Repackaged, refined, but still the same. I exhaled quietly, not out of frustration, out of clarity. Because now I understood. This wasn't about the wedding. It wasn't about the invitation. It wasn't even about that moment at the door. It was about something else entirely. Something that had already happened. Before I even got on that plane. You're telling me, I said, that there's a legal document with my name on it that I never signed. We'll talk about details later, he replied quickly. Right now, you need to focus on resolving the balance. Details. Later. No, that wasn't how this was going to work. Not anymore. I want a copy of the contract, I said. Silence. Immediate heavy. You don't need that, he said. I do. It's already signed. It doesn't change anything. It changes everything. Another pause. This one longer than the rest. Because now, we weren't having the same conversation anymore. He was still trying to control the outcome. And I had shifted to understanding the process. I added calmly, "That won't be necessary. It already is." The call ended shortly after that. Not with resolution. Not with agreement. Just distance. I set the phone down slowly, and for the first time since this started, I wasn't confused. I wasn't hurt. I wasn't even angry, I was certain, because there was only one explanation left, one that fit every detail, every action, every silence. They hadn't just expected me to pay, they had already put me in a position where I was supposed to have no choice. And that meant one thing. My name hadn't just been mentioned, it had been used. I opened my laptop, pulled up a blank document, and started typing. Because when something doesn't make sense, you don't guess, you verify. And if there was a contract with my name on it, I was going to see it, line by line. Signature included. I thought I was dealing with a misunderstanding. But by the time I finished that call, I knew the truth. This wasn't a mistake, it was a document. With my name on it. And I was about to find out who actually signed it. The request took less than 10 minutes to write. Clear, direct, formal. I kept it simple, identified myself, referenced the event, and asked for a full copy of the guarantor agreement associated with my name. I attached a scan of my passport for verification, exactly the way they required. No emotion, no accusation, just facts. Because when you're dealing with something that doesn't make sense, you don't argue, you document. I read the email once more before sending it. Then I hit send. And just like that, the situation stopped being a conversation and became a record. The response came faster than I expected. 48 hours, they said. 2 days. 2 days between suspicion and proof. I closed my laptop and leaned back in the chair, staring at the ceiling. It was strange. How quickly something shifts when you stop reacting and start thinking. Because up until that call, this had felt like something emotional, something personal, something messy. But now, it felt structured, defined, almost clinical. There was either a contract with my name on it, or there wasn't. There was either a signature, or there wasn't. And if there was, it would tell me everything I needed to know. The waiting wasn't the hardest part, the silence was. Because the calls didn't stop, they just changed. The first one came that evening. My aunt. Her voice soft, concerned, the kind of tone people use when they've already decided what you should do. "Athena, honey, your mother told me everything. I think this has all gotten a little out of hand." Out of hand? I said nothing, just listened. "Your parents are under a lot of pressure right now," she continued. "The venue, the costs, your sister's future, it's a lot." Still nothing. Because I knew this pattern. They weren't asking questions. They were building a narrative. "You've always been the responsible one," she added. "The successful one. Sometimes that means stepping in when others can't." There it was, expectation disguised as praise. "I didn't agree to pay for anything," I said calmly. A pause, then. "Well, your name is on the contract." "Yes," I replied. "That's what I've been told." Another pause. Thinner this time. "Then maybe it's just easier if you handle it quietly," she said. "Family doesn't need to make everything legal." I almost smiled at that. Because that was the entire point. They didn't want it to be legal, because if it was, they'd lose control of it. "I'll take care of it," I said. And I meant it. Just not in the way she expected. By the next morning, more messages had come in, texts, emails, different voices, same story. "You promised. You agreed. You're backing out." None of it was true, but truth wasn't the goal, consistency was. If enough people repeated the same version, it became easier to believe. I saved everything, screenshots, timestamps, every message, because stories can change, records don't. Rachel called that afternoon. "I'm guessing it's getting loud," she said without preamble. "That's one way to put it. They're pushing you to pay before you see the contract." "Good." I paused. "Good. It means they're nervous," she said. People don't rush like that unless they're afraid of what happens if you slow down. That made sense. Everything about this had urgency, pressure. A timeline that didn't belong to me, and that meant someone else was trying to control the outcome. Just wait for the document, she added. Don't commit to anything until you see it. I won't. I know you won't. The second day felt longer than the first. Because now, it wasn't about possibility anymore, it was about confirmation. I went through my own records that morning, bank statements, emails, old documents, anything that might connect to this. There was nothing, no communication, no agreement, no authorization, which meant, if something existed, it hadn't come from me. The email arrived just after 10 a.m. Subject line. Document request, Sinclair event. My hand didn't move immediately. It just hovered. Because there's a moment, right before you open something, when everything is still uncertain, and once you do, it isn't. I clicked. The message was short, professional, neutral. They had verified my identity. Attached was the guarantor agreement, PDF format, 11 pages. I downloaded it, opened it, and for a second I didn't scroll, I just looked at the first page. Event details, date, location, cost. Exactly what they said. Everything looked legitimate. Structured. Clean. Real. I scrolled. Payment terms. Page 3. Everything was in order. Everything made sense. Until the final page. The guarantor section. My name was printed clearly. Below it? A signature. For a second, my brain tried to accept it, because it was familiar. Close enough to mine that someone who didn't know me wouldn't question it. The shape was similar. The letters, almost right. But only almost. I leaned forward, zooming in, because details matter. And this was all detail. The angle was wrong, the pressure inconsistent. The way the letters connected, not mine, not even close. It looked like someone had practiced, tried to copy, gotten just enough right to pass, but not enough to be real. I stared at it for a long time, not in shock, not in disbelief, just recognition. Because now, everything fit. The invitation, the silence, the locked door, the pressure. It wasn't random, it was coordinated. They hadn't just expected me to pay. They had built a situation where I was supposed to have no way out. Except, they missed one thing. I reached for my passport, opened it to the signature page, placed it next to screen, side by side, real and not. There was no comparison, no overlap, no doubt. That's not my signature, I said quietly. And in that moment, this stopped being a family issue and became something else entirely. I picked up my phone and called Rachel. She answered on the first ring. Well, I have it, I said. And I looked at the screen again, at the name, at the signature that wasn't mine. It's forged. Silence. Then a slow exhale. Okay, she said. No, we move. They thought putting my name on that contract would trap me. What they didn't realize was, it gave me exactly what I needed. Proof. And now, they weren't the ones in control anymore. The calls didn't stop. They multiplied. It started with one voicey, then another, then 5 more. By the end of that day, my phone felt less like a device and more like a doorway I couldn't close. Each call carried the same message, just dressed differently. My aunt called first. Her tone was softer this time, less confident, more persuasive. Athena, I think this has gone far enough. I didn't respond immediately. I let her continue. Your parents are overwhelmed. The venue is pushing. Your sister just got married. This should be a happy time. Happy. That word didn't belong anywhere near this situation. I've seen the contract, I said calmly. A pause. Small, but noticeable. Well, then you understand the position everyone is in. Yes, I replied. I do. Another pause. Because now the conversation had shifted. She expected agreement. I gave her clarity instead. And I also understand, I added, that I didn't sign it. It's longer this time. Thicker. Athena, she said carefully, sometimes in families, we help each other without getting caught up in technicalities. Technicalities. That's what she called it. Forgery reduced to a detail, I said. And I'm not mistaken. Her voice changed after that. Less soft. More firm. Then you're choosing to make this difficult. No, I replied quietly. I'm choosing to make it accurate. The next call came from my uncle. No softness this time, no careful tone, just direct pressure. "This isn't how we raised you." I almost laughed at that. Because he hadn't raised me. Not even a little. "I didn't agree to pay for anything," I said. "You don't need to agree," he snapped. "Your name is on it. That's what matters." "No," I replied. "That's what you've been told matters? You're being selfish?" There it was. The word they always use when someone stops doing what they expect. Selfish. As if boundaries are a flaw. As if saying no is a betrayal. "I'm being consistent," I said. "You're abandoning your family. I wasn't included to begin with." That stopped him. Not because it was dramatic, but because it was true, and truth when it lands cleanly doesn't leave much room to argue. The messages started coming in faster after that. Texts, emails, different numbers, different names, same pressure. "Just handle it. It's easier this way. Don't turn this into something bigger." That last one stayed with me. Because that's what they were really afraid of. Not the money, not the contract, the size of the situation. Because if this stayed small, it stayed controllable. But if it grew, if it became visible, then everything changed. I sat at the desk in my hotel room, phone face down beside me, laptop open. The contract still on the screen. My name at the bottom. That signature. Wrong. Every time I looked at it, the same thought came back. They expected me not to look closely. They expected me to accept it, to absorb it, to fix it, quietly, like I always had. But this time, I wasn't reacting, I was observing, and the more I observed, the clearer it became. This wasn't panic on their side, it was coordination. Rachel called in the middle of it. "You sound calm," she said. "I am." "Good. That means you're thinking. I have the contract. And it's not even close to my signature." Then they're in trouble. I looked at the screen again. Not at the name. At the structure, the terms. The liability. "They think they can pressure me into paying before this becomes official," I said. "Exactly," she replied. "Because once it becomes official, it's not about family anymore. It's about law." That was the shift. The line they didn't want crossed. Family can be manipulated, law can't. The next message came while I was still on the phone. A group text. I hadn't been part of it before. Now I was multiple names, multiple numbers, all in one place. And right at the top, my mother. "We need to resolve this as a family." I stared at the message for a second. Then the replies started. One after another. "She should just pay it. This doesn't need to be public. Why is she making this harder than it needs to be?" No one asked a question. No one asked for proof. They didn't need to. Because they already had a version of the story. And in that version, I was the problem. I typed one message. Just one. "I've reviewed the contract." The replies paused. Not stopped. Paused. That was all it took. Because now, this wasn't speculation anymore. It was fact. "The signature isn't mine," I added. Silence. Not a single reply. Not immediately. And that silence said more than anything they had sent before. Because for the first time they weren't sure what to say. A minute passed. Then another. Finally, "My father, you're overthinking this." "Of course." "Minimize, control. It's not complicated," he added. "The contract is valid." I looked at the screen. At his words. At the certainty he was trying to project. Then I typed. "No, it isn't." Another pause. Then, "You don't understand how these things work." That's when I realized something. He wasn't talking to me. Not really. He was talking to the version of me that used to exist. The one that didn't question, didn't verify, didn't push back. But that version wasn't here anymore. I closed the laptop slowly, set the phone aside, and leaned back in the chair. Because at that point, the pressure wasn't confusing, it wasn't overwhelming, it was predictable. And predictability is control. They thought pressure would make me fold. They thought noise would make me doubt. But all it did was confirm one thing. They weren't trying to solve this. They were trying to stop me. Before I made it real, I thought they were desperate. I didn't realize. They were trying to keep something much bigger hidden. That wasn't pressure anymore. That was a threat. The tone changed the next morning. Not louder. Not more aggressive. Just sharper. Like whatever they had been trying before, pressure, persuasion, repetition, hadn't worked. And now they were trying something else. It started with a message from my father. No greeting, no context, just one line. We need to talk. Now. I didn't respond immediately. Not because I was avoiding it. Because I was watching. There's a difference between reacting to pressure. 5 minutes later, my phone rang. His name again. This time I answered, Athena. His voice was different. Lower. More controlled. Like he'd decided something. We're going to resolve this today, he said. That wasn't a request. I've already told you, I replied calmly. I didn't sign that contract. That's not the issue anymore. A pause. Just long enough to make sure I was listening. The issue, he continued, is what happens if you keep pushing this. There it was. Not explanation. Not argument. A shift. From pressure to consequence. I leaned back slightly in my chair. Go on, I said. You think this is simple, he added. You think you can just point at a signature and walk away. I don't think anything, I replied. I'm verifying facts. You're escalating something that doesn't need to be escalated. That depends on how it started. Another pause. Longer this time. Because now. We were speaking clearly. No more pretending. If this goes further, he said slowly, it won't just affect us. I didn't interrupt. I didn't need to. You've built a career over there, he continued. You work with compliance, contracts, reputation matters in that world. I felt it then. Not fear, recognition. Because that wasn't random. That wasn't frustration. That was targeted. You're suggesting this could affect my job, I asked. I'm saying things have consequences, he replied. And once something like this becomes official, people start asking questions. Questions. About what? I hadn't done anything, but that's the point of a threat. It doesn't have to be logical. It just has to be possible enough to make you hesitate. You're worried about the wrong person being questioned, I said quietly. That's not how it works, he snapped. Once it's out there, it's out there. Investigations don't stay clean. I let that sit. Because now, it was clear, this wasn't about resolving anything. It was about containment, keeping it small, keeping it quiet, keeping it controlled. Let me make this simple, he said after a moment. You handle the payment and this goes away. There it was. The trade. Not framed as one. But obvious. You're asking me to take responsibility, I said, for something I didn't do. I'm asking you to protect your family? No, I replied calmly. You're asking me to protect you. Silence. Heavy, because truth doesn't need volume, it just needs accuracy. You've always done this, he said finally. Turn things into something bigger than they are. I almost smiled, because that was familiar. Minimize the action. Blame the reaction. Classic. What exactly do you think this is? I asked. A misunderstanding. A misunderstanding, I repeated. With a forged signature. That word again, he muttered. Yes, I said. Because it fits, he exhaled sharply. And when he spoke again, the control slipped just enough to reveal what was underneath. You don't understand the position we're in, he said. The venue. The timing. The pressure. We didn't have options. We always have options, I replied. You just didn't like the ones available. We used what we had. There it was, not a denial, not really, a justification, which is always more honest than a defense. You used my name, I said. No response. You signed something I didn't agree to. Still nothing. And now you're trying to make me responsible for it. A long pause. Then. You're part of this family. That again. Always the same anchor, as if being connected by blood meant being available for use. I stood up and walked toward the window. The parking lot below looked the same as it had every day. Ordinary. Unaware. You locked me out of the wedding, I said quietly. And now you want me to pay for it. That's not what this is about. That's exactly what this is about. His tone shifted again. More urgent now, less controlled. If you push this, he said, it won't end the way you think it will. I turned slightly, looking at my reflection in the glass. Not at him. Not at the conversation. At myself. Because this wasn't about him anymore. What do you think I'm trying to something? Yes, I said. I am. Another pause. Then, maybe. But not the kind he meant. Maybe, I replied, but it's mine to make. The line went quiet, not disconnected, just empty, because there wasn't anything left for him to say that would change the direction this was going. And he knew it. When the call ended, I didn't move right away. I just stood there, phone still in my hand, letting the silence settle again. But this time, it felt different, not uncertain, not heavy, clear, because that conversation had answered something important. They weren't confused. They weren't overwhelmed. They were aware of what they had done, of what it meant, and of what would happen if it was seen. I walked back to the desk, closed my laptop, and picked up the printed contract. That signature, still wrong, still obvious, still real enough to matter. They're not trying to fix this, I said quietly to myself. They're trying to hide it. That wasn't pressure anymore, and it wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a threat, and threats only happen when someone has something to lose. The invitation came the next day. Not a formal one, not printed, just a message, correct, carefully worded, family brunch, Sunday, 12 p.m., we need to resolve this together, that word again. I stared at the screen for a few seconds longer than necessary, because by now I understood something clearly. When my family said, together, they didn't mean equal, they meant controlled. The message came from my aunt, but I didn't need to ask who organized it. This had my mother's structure all over it, careful timing, a defined setting, an audience. Because this wasn't about conversation. It was about positioning. They weren't trying to talk to me. They were trying to surround me. Rachel didn't even wait for me to explain. She asked the moment I told her. Yes. Multiple family members. Yes. She exhaled slowly. That's not a discussion. I know. That's a pressure play. Exactly. They think if enough people are there, she continued, you'll fold. Or at least hesitate. Which is all they need. She wasn't wrong, because hesitation creates space, and space is where manipulation works best. Are you going? She asked. At the time, at the phrasing, at the intention behind it. Yes, I said. A pause. Then, good. Not concern. Not warning. Bring everything. She added. I will. And don't argue. I won't. Let them talk. I nodded, even though she couldn't see it. Then what? I asked. Her answer came without hesitation. Then you show them. The next 2 days were quiet. Not because the pressure stopped, but because it shifted. The calls slowed down. The messages became shorter, less aggressive, more contained. Like they were conserving energy, saving it. For Sunday I used the time differently. Not emotionally, not reactively, structurally. I printed everything. The contract. The email confirming the document. My passport signature. Every message they sent. Every attempt to pressure me. Not because I needed all of it, but because I wanted it organized, clear, undeniable. Because when something becomes public, clarity matters more than anything else. I placed everything into a single folder. Simple, clean. No unnecessary details. Just facts, because facts don't need to be explained. They just need to be seen. Saturday night, I didn't sleep much, because I was focused. There's a difference. Anxiety is noise, and my mind was quiet. Sunday morning came quickly. The sky was pale, muted. The kind of light that makes everything feel slower than it is. I dressed simply, nothing that stood out. Nothing that invited attention, because I wasn't going there to be seen. I was going there to be heard. The house was exactly how I remembered it. Same structure. Same driveway. Same sense of familiarity that didn't feel like comfort anymore. Cars were already parked outside, more than I expected. Which told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't small. This wasn't private. This was planned. I sat in the car for a moment before getting out. Hands resting lightly on the steering wheel. Folder on the passenger seat. Because there's always a moment. Right before something happens, where you still have a choice. You can walk away, delay it, avoid it. But once you step forward, that choice disappears. I picked up the folder, opened the door, and stepped out. The front door was unlocked. Of course it was. Because they expected me. Voices carried from inside, low, controlled. The kind of sound people make when they're preparing for something. Not relaxed, not casual. Intentional. I stepped into the hallway. Not dramatically, just paused. Like a conversation mid-sentence, 15 faces turned, some familiar, some less so. All watching, all waiting. My father was standing near the dining table, posture straight, expression fixed. Like he had already decided how this would go. My mother sat beside him, hands folded, eyes already slightly red. Prepared. My sister was there too. Quiet. Still, not looking at me directly. No one greeted me, no one asked how I was, no one acknowledged anything beyond my presence. Which was exactly what I expected. There was no empty chair, not at the table, not anywhere visible, a small detail, but intentional, because space, in rooms like this, is never accidental. Cousin Dylan stood up first, without saying anything, pulled a chair from the corner, placed it near the end of the table. A small gesture, but it shifted something, not the room, but the balance. I sat down, placed the folder on my lap, and waited. My father spoke first, of course he did. "We're here," he said, "because this situation has gotten out of hand." Out of hand. That phrase again, like this was chaos, uncontrolled, when in reality, this was the most structured it had been from the beginning. "You made a commitment?" he continued, looking directly at me. "And now you're refusing to honor it. No hesitation, no uncertainty, just narrative." Murmurs fall, nods. Quiet agreement, because repetition creates belief, and belief creates alignment. My mother spoke next. "We didn't want this to become public," she said softly. "We've always handled things privately." Privately. That word carried more weight than she intended, because private meant hidden, contained, unquestioned. "I invited you," my sister added quietly. "I wanted you there." That was the first time she looked at me. And for a second, just a second, there was something real in her expression. Then it disappeared, replaced by something else. Something practiced. The room felt full, not physically, emotionally. Like every person there had already chosen a side, and I was sitting at the edge of it. I didn't speak, not yet. Because this part was never about me talking. It was about them finishing, building their version completely, without interruption, without resistance. Because once they were done, there would be nothing left to add. Only something to show. I rested my hand lightly on the folder. Felt the weight of it. Not heavy, but certain, because everything inside it was real. They thought they had created a situation where I would need to explain myself, where I would need to defend, where I would need to justify. But they misunderstood something important. I didn't come there to argue. I came there to present. They thought they were calling me to answer for something. They didn't realize I was about to show them something they couldn't deny. I let them finish. Every word. Every version of the story they had already agreed on. Because once people commit to a narrative in front of others, they don't adjust it easily, they defend it. And that's exactly what I needed. Silence settled over the table. Not calm silence, expectant silence. The kind that waits for a response, for a reaction, for something emotional, something they could work with. My father looked at me first. "You've heard everything," he said. "Now it's your turn." There it was. The invitation, not the one printed on paper, the real one. Speak. Explain. Defend. I didn't rush, didn't react. I placed my hands lightly on the table, steady. Then I looked at him. "I've heard your version," I said calmly. Not confrontational, not defensive. Just clear. "And now I'm going to show you something." That word shifted the room. Not dramatically, subtly. Because show means proof, and proof changes everything. I reached down, opened the folder, and pulled out the first document, the contract. I placed it in the center of the table. Not sliding it, not pushing it, just placing it, deliberate, visible. "This is the agreement you've all been talking about," I said. A few people leaned forward, my aunt, my uncle, even my sister, just slightly, because now, this wasn't abstract anymore, it was physical, real. "My name is on it," I continued. That much, they already believed. That's what they'd been told, that's what they'd accepted. I pointed to the signature. But this? I paused. Not for effect. For clarity. The words didn't explode. They didn't need to. They landed quietly, and then spread. "No," my father said immediately. Too quickly. "That's your name. That's your signature." "It's my name," I replied. "Not my signature." I pulled out the second document, my passport. Opened to the signature page, placed it next to the contract, side by side. "This is my actual signature," I said. "Look at them." For a moment, no one moved. Because people don't like being told they're wrong, especially not in front of others. But curiosity always wins eventually. My aunt leaned in first, picked up the contract, held them closer. Her eyes narrowed slightly. My uncle stood, moved around the table, looked over her shoulder. My sister didn't move, but her gaze shifted, back and forth. "Between the two, they're not the same," my aunt said quietly. Not loudly, not dramatically, just honestly. That was the first crack, not in the room, in the story. "It's close," my father said quickly. "Signatures can vary." "No," I replied. I didn't raise my voice, didn't need to. Because now, this wasn't about who spoke louder. It was about what was visible. "The angle is wrong," I continued. "The pressure is inconsistent. The letter connections aren't even similar." I wasn't explaining to convince them. I was explaining so they couldn't pretend not to understand. "That doesn't prove anything," he snapped. "It proves enough," I said. I reached into the folder again, pulled out the printed email, placed it beside the others. "This is from the venue," I said. "They've started a verification process." That word hit differently. Verification. Because now, this wasn't internal anymore. It wasn't contained. It wasn't private. "They've also suspended any collection against me," I added. "Until they confirm the signature." The room shifted again, not visibly, but structurally, because authority had entered the conversation. Not mine. Theirs. My uncle stepped back slightly, crossed his arms. Thinking, my aunt looked at my mother, not with support, with question. My sister finally spoke. Quiet. "Tate, what are you saying?" I looked at her, not harshly, not softly, just directly. "I'm saying I didn't sign that contract." A pause. Then, "What are you implying?" That word, carefully chosen, because she didn't want to say it herself. "I'm not implying anything," I said. "I'm stating a fact." Silence. Thicker now, less comfortable, because once a fact is introduced, it demands resolution. My father shifted slightly. For the first time since I arrived, a small movement. "But enough. This is unnecessary," he said. "We can handle this without making it bigger." There it was, attainment. Control. "It's already bigger," I replied. "You just don't control it anymore." That landed, not loudly, but clearly. My mother spoke then, her voice softer, but strained. "Athena, we didn't mean for this to happen like this." I looked at her, waited, because that sentence was incomplete. "How did you mean for it to happen?" I asked. She didn't answer, couldn't. "Because there's no version of this." That sounds reasonable when spoken out loud. My sister stood suddenly, chair scraping against the floor. "This is ridiculous," she said. "You're turning this into something it's not." I met her gaze, calm, steady. "No," I said. "I'm turning it into exactly what it is." Another silence. Heavier than before. Because now, everyone understood, not fully, but enough. This wasn't a disagreement. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was something else. Something that didn't belong in a family conversation. I closed the folder slowly. Not in a rush. Not dramatically. "I'm not paying that bill," I said. Clear. Final. No one argued immediately. Because there wasn't a response ready for this version of the story. They had prepared for emotion. For hesitation. For pressure. They hadn't prepared for proof. They thought that was the moment everything would stop. That the truth would stay inside that room. But they were wrong. Because what came next wasn't part of their plan. And this time, they wouldn't be the ones explaining anything. The police would. For a moment, no one spoke. Not because there was nothing to say, because no one knew how to say it anymore. The room felt different now. Same people, same table, same house, but the control had shifted, and everyone could feel it. My father was the first to move, not toward me, away. A small step back, like distance might give him space to think, to recover, to reframe. "This isn't over," he said, not loudly, but firmly. like he was trying to pull the situation back into something familiar. Manageable. I didn't respond. Because for the first time since this started, I didn't need to. My mother looked between us, her expression tight, uncertain. "This doesn't need to go any further," she said softly. "We can still fix this." Fix. Another word that sounded simple, but carried weight. Because fixing something like this only works if everyone agrees to pretend. "I'm not fixing something I didn't do," I said. Calm. Final. My sister shook her head, frustration replacing whatever restraint she had left. "You're blowing this out of proportion," she said. "It's just paperwork. Just paperwork." That almost made me laugh, because that's exactly how it started. Small, dismissible, easy to ignore. Until it wasn't. Before I could respond, there was a knock at the door, sharp, precise, not loud, but enough. Every head turned. At the same time, like something instinctive, something immediate. A second knock followed. Same rhythm, same certainty. My father didn't move right away, just stood there, still, watching the door like it might explain itself. "I'll get it," my uncle said, already moving. But something in the room had changed again. Not tension. Something else. Something closer to recognition. The hallway felt longer than it should have as he walked down it. Each step quieter than the last. The door opened, two voices, low, professional, unfamiliar. Then footsteps, coming back. Not alone this time. When they entered the room, everything stopped, not pause, stopped. Two officers, uniformed, calm, present. They didn't raise their voices, didn't rush, didn't react to the tension already in the room, because they didn't need to. Their presence did that for them. "Good afternoon," one of them said. Neutral tone, measured. "We're here regarding a report connected to a financial agreement." No one responded, because everyone understood what that meant, even if no one wanted to say it. The officer stepped slightly forward, holding a folder, official, structured, not emotional. "We've received documentation indicating a possible forged signature on a guarantor contract totaling $40,000. He continued, clear, direct, unavoidable. My father straightened slightly, tension visible now. "This is a misunderstanding," he said quickly. "We were just discussing it." The officer nodded once, not agreeing, not agreeing, just acknowledging. "That's why we're here," he said. He opened the folder, pulled out a document, the same contract, but now, it didn't look like theirs anymore, it looked like evidence. "We'll need to confirm a few details," he added. No one moved, no one spoke, because the situation had crossed a line, and once it crosses, it doesn't go back. My mother's hand tightened around the edge of the table. My sister looked down. Not at the document, not at me, just down. My aunt stepped back, physically, like distance might separate her from what was happening. "This won't take long," the officer said. But that wasn't true. Not really. Because even if the conversation itself was short, the impact wasn't. "Who handled the signing of this agreement?" he asked. Silence. Not confusion, not hesitation, silence. The kind that happens when everyone knows the answer, but no one wants to be the one to say it. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. Because this wasn't my moment to explain, it was theirs. The officer looked around the room. Patient, waiting. My father finally stepped forward, slightly controlled. "I was involved in the process," he said. Careful wording, deliberate. "Were you present when the guarantor signed?" The officer asked. A pause. "Long enough to matter, yes," he said. Another pause. Then, "Can you confirm that the signature was made by Athena Sinclair?" That was the question. Clear, direct, no space to reframe it. The room held its breath. My father didn't answer immediately, because for the first time, there wasn't a version of this that could be adjusted, softened, redirected. He looked at the document, at the signature, at everything that had led to this moment, and for a second, just a second, the certainty disappeared. He started, then stopped. That was enough. The officer closed the folder slowly. Not abruptly, not dramatically, just concluded. "We'll need to continue this formally," he said. No raised voices, no accusations, just process, and process is what they had been trying to avoid from the beginning. I stood there quietly, watching, not with satisfaction, not with anger, just clarity. Because this wasn't revenge. It wasn't even justice yet, it was truth. Finally existing somewhere it couldn't be ignored. My mother looked at me then. Really looked. For the first time. Not with expectation, not with control, but with something else, something closer to understanding. "How did this get here?" she asked quietly. I held her gaze for a moment, then answered simply, "You invited me." Silence again. But this time, it felt different. Not heavy, not tense, just finished. I picked up my folder, closed it, turned toward the door. No one stopped me, no one spoke. Because there was nothing left to say that hadn't already been exposed. As I stepped outside, the air felt lighter. Not because anything had been resolved, but because something had been revealed. And sometimes, that's enough. They locked me out of a wedding. But they couldn't lock the truth away, and in the end, it wasn't me who had to explain anything. It was them.